In the quiet hum of a mid-morning Washington, beneath the solemn dome of the district courthouse, something small happened that would come to shake the pillars of power. It began not with a gavel, but with a gesture. Karoline Leavitt, at 27 the youngest press secretary in U.S. history, walked into the courtroom as an observer. On her chest, a silver cross, modest, barely noticeable unless you were looking. Judge Charles Hargrove was looking. What followed was unexpected. A terse exchange. A fine. $500 issued for displaying religious paraphernalia in court. The words felt like a splinter under her skin. Karoline paid it, but not with silence. That night, in the stillness of her White House office, she didn't rage. She didn't post. She drafted legal briefs. A lawsuit. She called Rachel Harper, the constitutional firebrand known for her surgical litigation. The strategy was simple. Make the fine a symbol. Not for vengeance. For accountability. The lawsuit named Judge Hargrove directly, $800 million in damages for religious discrimination, First Amendment violations, and defamation. Most thought it would get tossed. But then the leaks began. A court IT staffer named Ethan Brooks slipped an anonymous email to Karoline. Attached were internal memos, exchanges between Hargrove and Judge Ellen Carver. Phrases leapt out of the screen. Target her cross. Send a message to Trump. From there, everything changed. Rachel moved swiftly. Evidence was cataloged, affidavits prepared. Karoline, who had once stood behind a podium to speak for the president, now found herself standing for something far older, the simple right to believe. But it wasn't just about faith. Whispers spread of a pattern in Hargrove's judgments, disproportionate fines against those wearing religious symbols. The Black File, a sealed internal dossier, was uncovered by Linda Martinez, a seasoned investigator for the Judicial Council. 80% of cases targeting Christians, 100% unspoken until now. Social media caught the scent. Jake Torres, a media strategist from Trump's campaign, spun the momentum. Hashtags ignited. Hashtag Judge on Trial. Hashtag Stand with Karoline. It became cultural currency. But as public opinion surged behind Karoline, the system she challenged cracked open. Miss Thompson, a quiet court clerk, handed over 12 years of handwritten notes. Her voice shook when she said, "He always went after the faithful." The pressure built like steam under a locked door. Judge Hargrove, once a respected figure in judicial circles, retreated into isolation. A man used to shaping outcomes now found himself buried beneath them. He reached for allies, but few answered. Even Carver began distancing herself, her own reputation buckling under scrutiny. Then came the escape attempt. He fled Geneva under an alias, documents in hand. But justice had already taken root. An international warrant was issued. His villa in Switzerland was found. Journalists posted photos of him looking pale, diminished. Not a judge, but a fugitive. Karoline did not gloat. She stood before the American flag at a press conference and said, simply, "We don't pursue retribution. We pursue reform." And reform came. The federal court ruled in her favor. The D.C. judiciary was ordered to issue new guidelines on religious expression and to undergo mandatory First Amendment training. Across the country, legislators began pushing similar measures. Karoline, once dismissed as a figurehead, became the architect of a movement. Not because she shouted louder, but because she stood her ground, in a courtroom, in front of a judge, wearing a cross that no longer just symbolized her faith, but a nation's reckoning with the boundaries of belief and justice. The verdict came down on a cloudless morning, not with thunder, but with precision. In a tightly packed federal courtroom, the judge's voice rang clear. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Damages awarded. Undisclosed, but significant. What mattered more was the mandate, sweeping judicial reform in the D.C. Circuit, formal disciplinary action against Hargrove, and an order for systemic review of bias in courtroom policy. It was precedent. Outside, supporters lined the courthouse steps, not in protest, but in quiet solidarity. Many wore symbols of their own faith, crosses, stars, crescents. A few held simple signs. Justice doesn't bow. Karoline didn't speak that day. She returned to the White House not as a victor, but as a woman who had walked through fire and refused to burn. Her office window overlooked a city still tense with contradiction, still flawed, but now listening. A week later, she received an envelope, hand-delivered, unmarked. Inside was a short, trembling letter from Charles Hargrove. I was wrong. I let fear disguise itself as principle. I confused order with silence. What I did was not justice, it was control. And I see now that I've been blind. He signed it not as judge, but simply Charles. She showed the letter to no one. She placed it in a drawer with the original $500 fine, now framed in gold trim, a reminder that the small things matter. In Geneva, Hargrove surrendered quietly. The extradition was negotiated without drama. He would return, face charges for obstruction and abuse of power, and, in a rare gesture, testify in favor of judicial reform as part of a plea deal. His fall was undeniable, but so was the possibility of redemption. Karoline, meanwhile, declined offers for political office, a book deal, and a major media contract. Instead, she accepted a role as special advisor on religious freedom to the Justice Department, not a title made for headlines, but one built for real change. She traveled to schools and courthouses across the country, speaking not about victory, but vigilance. Our institutions, she often said, are only as just as the people who stand inside them. And sometimes, justice needs someone who won't back down, even if they're alone. Months later, she stood once again on the steps of the same D.C. courthouse, not with a protest behind her, but a new plaque being unveiled. It read, "In honor of those who defend liberty not with anger, but with courage." Dedicated in recognition of Karoline Leavitt and the movement for faith and fairness. Beside her, Rachel Harper nodded, arms crossed, ever the realist. Jake Torres filmed the moment for posterity. Linda Martinez watched from the crowd, her expression unreadable, but her eyes bright with respect. And Karoline? She smiled, not the smile of a woman who'd won, but of one who knew the work was never really finished. As twilight fell across the Capitol, she walked away from the courthouse alone, her silver cross catching the last light of the sun. In its glint was a message. The law may bend, but truth does not. And justice, when pursued with clarity, heart, and strength, doesn't just punish. It transforms.